I'm Charlie Sykes. No bye week for us. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, what a week. Paul Ryan will be getting the job that he never wanted. Joe Biden says he won't run for the job that he's wanted for decades. Hillary Clinton testifies on Benghazi. The Milwaukee County Board sues the Milwaukee County Executive. Good times. The state legislature passes reforms of John Doe and campaign finance laws. Another police officer killed in New York. And in Milwaukee, arrests in the year-old case of the murder of 5-year-old Layla Peterson. But we start with this story, the story of a Buck star who wanted to buy a watch. John Henson is a 24-year-old forward center for the Milwaukee Bucks who found himself at the center of a heated controversy over racial profiling last week. On his Instagram account, Henson posted an account of his attempt to buy a Rolex watch at a suburban jeweler, only to find himself locked out by store employees. He was only allowed in the store after police arrived. Even then, according to a statement from the Whitefish Bay Police Department, employees asked officers on the scene to stay with them while Henson looked at the watches. Police say they refused. Wrote Henson, "This was one of the most degrading and racially prejudiced things I've ever experienced in life and would not wish this on anyone." Afterwards, the store's owner apologized for the incident.
I mean, this is one of those things that's just a horrific misunderstanding, but as a jeweler, we feel so threatened lately. I mean, we're under siege. We've had 3 robberies in 18 months, so we're scared.
Joining me on our panel this morning, Michael Holt from the Milwaukee Community Journal, former state representative Michelle Litchens, defense attorney Dan Adams, and Colin Roth, the managing editor of RightWisconsin.com. We'll start with you, Michael Holt. You actually called into my radio show on this. What is your take on this? Was this a case of racial profiling, or was it just a jewelry store with an excess of caution?
It was both. It was both. And I mentioned on this show several years, 15, 20 years ago, that after leaving the show one time in a nice suit, tailor-made suit, I went over to the Bayshore Mall, and I was walking across the parking lot, heading towards Boston's store, and 2 elderly white women started coming towards me, and they were talking, and I got about 10 feet away. One looked up, saw me. Both of them clutched a purse and made a wide circle around me. Is that racial profiling, prejudice? It is. And this scenario smacks of it. Some good has come out of this. One, we're talking about it, even though a lot of folks are calling in to your show. We're in denial. We're talking about it. And the owner has gone so far as to meet with the Urban League, and they're going to train a young black man. But this is a case of systemic prejudice and racial profiling that takes place throughout Milwaukee County.
Well, okay, but we don't know whether it's systemic, but we do know in this in this particular case, you have a guy, and you know what I think is, of course, ironic is that this was probably the best customer they were going to have all year. The guy just signed a $44 million contract. So in this particular case, if it was racial profiling, it was really bad capitalism. What do you make of this case?
Yeah, there's obviously a couple different points of view, but I think it's very clearly, just given some of the tells of what happened, that there's an element of racial profiling. And I don't think that should surprise any of us. We're humans. Prejudice is still here, and it's likely to stay with us, unfortunately.
But there's a little twist on this, that the police had checked that he had apparently come on Friday. Somebody had called the police department last week because somebody had called the jeweler and said, "What time do you close? Do you have Rolexes?" This alarmed the employees enough to call the cops. The cops go there. They see the license plate on the car that shows up. It's a dealer plate. They call the dealership. They don't get the right information. And then they tell the jewelry store employees, call back if this shows up again. And so their defense is, on Monday, he shows up again, same car. The police had told them to call. They call.
But even after that, they still wanted the police to hang around. I mean, you know, I think that we joke a lot about these microaggressions. This was actually a macroaggression. I mean, you imagine if there was a white younger man who showed up in a polo shirt, would they have acted the same way? Probably not. Again, probably not. They would not have acted the same way.
I would put that in the category of almost certainly.
But you know what I'm glad about is John Henson is what a great role model. The corporate guys from the jeweler apologized. he took that apology.
Right.
I mean, what grace and character that guy displayed.
Now, the owner of the jewelry store did say that, well, we've been robbed 3 times. Actually, I think he was referring to all of their stores. I think that the store in Whitefish Bay has not been robbed since 2013. But downtown, and I've seen the videotape of this, you had, young men come in and they smashed the various cases. I mean, it was obvious. It's a very violent kind of robbery. Does that explain what happened here, or was it racial profiling?
I think it explains the initial apprehension with the phone call, giving them the jitters, and then seeing the dealer license plates. Then when the police called, they couldn't find out who the plates belonged to, so they assumed it was a stolen vehicle. I think that initial, just what's going on with jewelry stores nowadays, I think they have to be on edge. I think I do agree with Michael, though. This is a little bit of maybe both, which is unfortunate, but I also think it's a systemic problem because we don't talk about race anymore in this society.
Absolutely, and that's one of the biggest problems. And from your show, a lot of folks are just, white folks are in denial that this exists. I mean, that's true. They want to sweep this under the rug.
I understand. But in fairness, most of the callers to the show, I think, saw this as racial profiling.
I'll give them that. But there's still this underground. Now, there's this perception that all these jewelers are locking their doors and letting select people in. I was at Hoosiers in Brookfield. That's where I go. It's that time of the year where I have to buy something. And the guy was telling me, the owner was telling me that an alert went out throughout the Midwest. So everybody's a little bit shaky.
About the Rolex.
About the Rolex.
Right.
They don't sell Rolexes. So that, but I feel a little queasy going out to Brookfield sometimes. I feel queasy go to the east side sometimes. I feel queasy about going to the south side.
In this particular case, how this series of misunderstandings led to all of this. The first thing is the call to the jewelry store that says, do you have Rolexes? What time do you close? And this alarmed the store employees so much they closed a half hour early, and then they called the cops. Why did they do that? I mean, most people
was it a black voice?
Well, that's I can't get around that. If you're just go through it logically, you have an African American sounding voice that triggers all of this. If this had been me, if this had been Colin Roth, if this had been Dan Adams, none of this would have happened. And I think we need to be honest enough to recognize that. So, what has your glass half full? What has your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, let's say the same topic. My glass is half empty because far too many people discussing the John Henson racial profiling incident on Charlie's show are in denial. My glass is half full because at least we're talking about this insidious form of prejudice again.
Michelle Litchens.
My glass is half empty because Assembly Democrats decided not to do their job and recuse themselves from voting on campaign finance reform this week. It's half full because they didn't decide to run to Illinois like their brethren in the Senate.
Dan Adams.
Well, my glass is half full because some victims of gun violence are getting their day in court. Gun dealers who supplied the pistol used to shoot 2 Milwaukee police officers have been found liable. I hope the service that the Azana spa shooter used will also be held accountable. My glass is half empty because isn't it inevitable that Wisconsin's GOP will soon slam the courthouse door on victims of gun violence in the name of some new tort reform?
Colin Roth.
My glass is half full because Paul Ryan is going to be the Speaker of the House. It's half empty because I just can't envision a scenario where this doesn't tarnish his reputation.
Well, my glass is half full because legislators voted to reform Wisconsin's abusive John Doe law last week. It is half empty because every single Democrat member of the state assembly voted against reforms that would protect their constituents from unwarranted searches and abuse from their own government. Coming up on Sunday Insight, Paul Ryan now throwing his hat into the ring for Speaker of the House. What does that mean for his career and Republicans on Capitol Hill? Speaker Paul Ryan, he never wanted the job, and he said so repeatedly, and yet next week, Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan is likely to be elected Speaker of the House of Representatives. It was a remarkable turnaround for Ryan, who had said he already had his dream job as chair of the Ways and Means Committee. But pressure from fellow Republicans pushed Ryan to reconsider. And after laying out some conditions, including protecting his family time, Ryan said that he was all in. Colin Roth, were you surprised by that?
Not as this process dragged out, and the longer it went on, I thought it was more likely he was about to get in. What this tells us, though, is that I think his presidential ambitions are probably about done. This might be his last stop, and it ought to be exciting for a lot of conservatives. If we would have gone back 5 years and said, in 5 years, Paul Ryan will be Speaker of the House, I think a lot of us would have been elated. But He still has many of the intractable issues that are in that Republican caucus.
What do you make of the criticism from some of the national conservatives, a lot of conservative groups, PACs, who said that he was not conservative enough and tried to mount a campaign to block his speakership?
Well, it's not the point of the speaker to be the most conservative member, and he was clearly the consensus choice of the caucus. And it's frustrating to me just to see how crazy the right has gone, some on the right, in terms of this immigration issue, to be so hardline on this that we can't accept anyone who has comprehensive immigration.
My response to you three is I'm flabbergasted at the crack up of the conservatives in America. I mean, Paul Ryan, he's the main standard bearer for conservatism. He finally has, one of the best jobs politically, the most power, and you guys are poo-pooing it. What's going on
here? Well, I'm not. Actually, to a certain extent, you had this messy process, the crack up, which you're accurately describing, and yet at the end, you have your best and your brightest. You have the strongest advocate for conservative values, who is front and center. I think he's going to be a successful. I'm more optimistic than Kelly. I think he's going to be.
And he's a serious guy.
Well, he's a serious guy.
Not one of these.
And what was interesting to me though was it looked, in public like you had a lot of national conservatives who were split on this. But when it came down to the actual members of Congress who knew him, who've worked with him, they basically said, he's our guy. This House Freedom Caucus met with him, gave him a supermajority, which was an indication that Paul Ryan has a sweet spot. I think his character, I think his demeanor, I think his seriousness, all were very, very persuasive to his colleagues, which I think bodes well.
But it does, but that's because Paul Ryan is there for the right reasons. He's a policy wonk. He's not in this for the politics. He wants to balance the budget.
You didn't want him to take this job, though.
It's a personal thing. I just think he is not going to be home as much as he was before.
Okay.
I don't think he's going to be sleeping in his office anymore like he used to. He didn't want to participate in that Washington, D.C. crowd, so he spent time working on his bills, and he spent time with his family at night.
Was it? I was struck by the number of people who thought it was unreasonable that he wanted to have more family time. What was your reaction to that? How does that play?
Did they have any other suggestions?
No.
These people who are opposed to him putting out some caveats out there, did they ever recommend someone else that was going to do as good a job or better than Paul Ryan? They didn't.
I actually thought that this was one of the strongest moments that you actually had somebody stand up and go, you know what, I am not a total political wonk. I want to have a balanced life. And being a father is an important part of my life. That was a powerful, powerful message. And I think some of the critics completely missed the point on all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the reason why this is not going to work. He is serious about family time. He stays in Washington. He comes home on a weekend. He goes to the games. He, cares for his kids. He takes them out, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're very, very serious and as committed as he is, it's not going to happen as Speaker, because it's during the weekends that he has to go to all these fundraisers and raise money.
Well, but that's what he's saying. And that's the part that I thought was interesting, is that the part of his job that he's going to have to pass off to other people will be the traveling around and raising money, which I understand that for the political Washington insiders is a crucial part of his job. I actually think he brings so much else to the job that he doesn't need to be on the rubber chicken circuit. So now you may not want to hear it. We're going to tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, your
Mine is simple. My advice is to Congressman Paul Ryan. It's not too late.
Yes, it is.
Rescind your nomination as House Speaker. You'll thank me later.
Michelle Litchens.
My unsolicited advice is to Congress. You are given a restart with Paul Ryan as Speaker, so don't mess it up.
Dan Adams.
Milwaukee Board of School Directors ignore the predictable hysterics from the teachers union and put students first. Approve the Carmen Pulaski High School partnership. This is a modest proposal that has great potential to help kids.
Hear, hear. Colin Roth.
My advice for Assembly Democrats, try voting. We get you are opposed to certain legislation, but quitting on your constituents, really a bad look.
Well, my unsolicited advice is to Johnson Controls. Your CEO has been bankrolling the defense of a notorious scam artist who was just convicted of fraud in a huge multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. My advice, recognize that you've got a really big problem. Still ahead on Sunday Insight, Republicans and Democrats in Madison squaring off over a trio of controversial bills this week. Another wild week in Madison. Bills that would reform the Government Accountability Board, the John Doe law, and state campaign finance laws move forward, but not without some performance art from Assembly Democrats who all refused to vote on the campaign finance law because they said it was somehow a conflict of interest. As a result, the bill passed unanimously. It was a strange moment. Now, you were there for the whole Act 10 thing where the senators ran away. This was kind of a version of that, wasn't it?
I think they were trying to get a little attention with that stunt that they were pulling. But so now what happens to the committee members who voted against it in committee? You know, should they have recused themselves? What about the senators? Should they have recused themselves too? I think they've got some questions to answer. The Democrats were not happy with what was going on, but the state assembly or the state didn't have a choice about it, right? Because the courts told them they needed to change the laws to become compliant.
Well, that's the point that I think a lot of people have missed about this, is that what this law does is to bring Wisconsin into compliance with the U.S. Constitution. What a radical concept, Michael Holt.
Oh, it is a radical concept. Yeah, I'm really amazed at how much legislation Republicans have gotten through in the last 4 years. They've changed the whole status quo. And much of this stuff is self-serving, of course. You know, they don't need to. You know, one of the things about the Accountability Board, now they're going to have 2 boards, and they're going to put 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. Well, you know, the majority of people in this country are like me. We're independent. So who speaks for us when we think that the Democrats and Republicans...
Who speaks for you now?
Well, I'm saying Democrats and Republicans are different wings of the same bird.
You know, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be a great idea. What I do know, it's going to be better than what we have right now. The Government Accountability Board has been incompetent, it's been inept, it's been arrogant. And some of the documents that came out Thursday night, Friday morning about what was going on with the John Doe investigation, I mean, this was a hyper-partisan organization that was making up the law as it went on. At minimum, you would hope you would have a body that Republicans and Democrats would both be able to rely upon. Okay, your thoughts about the John Doe law? They could have totally, thrown out the John Doe law. They modified it so that at least when it comes to political crimes, you cannot slap a gag order on participants.
Right.
You're a defense lawyer.
But they also made it so you could not use John Doe to investigate crimes, but those crimes are only politically motivated crimes. So we've created this this politician escape Act. That's what this is.
Which, of course, not true.
No, it absolutely is. It can be used for some drug offenses, some sex offenses.
Grand jury.
And I've been advocating for John Doe law reform for a while, and we got to get rid of the gag orders for all of these cases. It's wrong. But just to scoop out some political offenses, leave everything else for blue-collar criminals, I think is wrong.
I would not have had a problem if they would have just abolished the whole John Doe proceedings. I mean, this whole notion, when people outside of Wisconsin find out that if they come and they raid your home, they can slap you with a gag order and you can't talk about it. As one federal judge said, it was screamingly unconstitutional, which of course it was.
Of course it was, right. And the fact that we're finally getting rid of this and reforming it and updating it is a good thing. And what Michelle said about the campaign finance rules and the fact that Democrats think that they can't vote on Act 10, tax cuts, that they wouldn't be able to vote ever on a campaign finance law is crazy.
Well, I think part of it is, I mean, they're looking for wedge issues, and they want to make the whole campaign finance law a major issue. My experience has been that politicians, editorial writers like to talk about campaign finance laws. Nobody else really cares about it. But again, I think at the end of the week, it is not unfair to say that Wisconsin became freer in terms of free speech. That in fact, some of this threat that you might go to jail for engaging in politics, or you have these other limits, those have been removed. That is a good thing. Now, what is it you don't get this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you are first.
Well, what I don't understand is why there's even a debate about school buses using their stop signs to control traffic when picking up and dropping off children. Are Milwaukee kids as important as suburban children?
Good point. Michelle Litchens.
Charlie, I don't get what Hillary Clinton did as Secretary of State if she didn't communicate with the ambassador of Libya or respond to their more than 600 increased security requests. What did Clinton do?
Dan Adams.
Why is anyone surprised that there's federal investigations into online sports betting sites, DraftKings and FanDuel? 4 years ago, the Fed shut down online poker sites and players lost all their money. People, put your money in a mutual fund.
Colin Roth.
What I don't get is whatever happened to the anti-war left? After all, Obama extended the war in Afghanistan and a soldier was killed in Iraq this week.
And we bombed a hospital. So what I don't get, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee has something called an Exclusiveness Excellence Center, which lists words like lame and crazy and political correctness as microaggressions. But the director of that center, named Warren Scherer, tweets out the F words to Republican candidates and talks about pandering to rich Jews. So at UWM, the word lame is offensive, but insulting conservatives and Jews is cool. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. First, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
Losers, with 124 plus homicides already, Milwaukee Central City has become the Babe Ruth of the Midwest. My winner, Police Chief Ed Flynn, whose emotional press conference about the murder of a 5-year-old probably endeared him to the black community. He finally showed it's more than just a job.
Michelle Litchens.
My winner is attorney Rick Essenberg, who knew the Constitution and First Amendment so well that my loser, John Doe prosecutor Francis Schmidt, felt Essenberg beat him up in court. Unsealed documents released by Waukesha County Court this week shined light on just how partisan and underwater Schmitz and his fellow John Doe cronies really were.
Dan Adams.
My loser is Milwaukee County Board Supervisor John Wyshawn. This week, a committee he sits on approved payment for his personal legal bills. You might remember he hired a lawyer to defend an ethics complaint for using tax money to pay for political mailers sent to Waukesha County. My winner is Supervisor Tony Staskunas, who's the only member of that committee to vote against this gross and naked misuse of public money. The rest of you should be ashamed.
Yeah, but they won't be. Colin Roth.
My winner this week is the First Amendment. Republicans in Wisconsin took major steps to protect First Amendment rights and ensure free speech is not criminalized and regulated in this state. My loser this week are those on the right who've gone full flip-flop and tried to trash Paul Ryan, a person they supported, liked, and embraced up until recent months.
Well, my winner is Paul Ryan, who will become the most powerful member of Congress next week when he becomes Speaker, a position that puts him third in line to the presidency. My loser, Paul Ryan, who never wanted the job and is now stuck with the political equivalent of having to herd cats. Good luck with that. Thanks for joining us and joining me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.